Welcome to Growth Rings, a Center for Coaching and Organizations learning event. Before we go any further, I want to remind you all that Zoom offers closed captioning in the toolbar at the bottom. Click on the CC icon live transcript and click the box at the bottom to enable transcription. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand. So CCO, as we like to call it, is a 501(c) nonprofit founded by a group of experienced executive coaches and organizational leaders to unleash human potential through coaching in organizations. So how do we do that? We unleash human potential by inspiring people to find their voice, supporting leaders to shift their mindset to solve big, complex, messy problems with grace and clarity. So, growing leaders who bring the power of coaching to their organizations and communities they serve, expanding access to coaching in organizations for all. So, one way that we expand access is through our Growth Rings learning events. You can find all of the Growth Rings and previous Growth Rings and offerings and other offerings under the events tab of our website. And if you're not on the mailing list already, you can sign up there as well. Another place to catch up on everything that's going on with CCO is our link tree, which I will post in the chat in just a moment. And you can find all of the things there, all of our events that we have going on. Another way that we expand access is through our ICF accredited Executive Coaching in Organizations, otherwise known as ECHO, Coach Training Education. We are currently recruiting for cohort 11, so if you know anybody who is an aspiring a coach, considering it, send them our way. And our next ECHO info session is on May 27th, and you can find a link on our link tree as well. So now to get to my favorite part, which is introducing our speaker for today. I have had the pleasure of getting to know Todd through ICF Minnesota, and he is on the Professional Development Committee and brings humor and fun to every event he hosts. Todd is a former MedTech executive turned executive coach, certified in body language. He helps leaders communicate with clarity and grounded presence, strengthening trust and influencing in high stakes moments. So without further ado, I will pass it over to Todd.
Thanks, Carla, and great to be here with all of you. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. So getting ready to know you here through today's event. This is going to be something interactive. So whether you're on camera, off camera, I'm going to probably ask you some questions. Please feel free to use the chat because all learning happens when we're learning together. And if it's one of the things I've really understood in working with leaders, especially groups of leaders, is there's so much that happens between each one of us, which is why I love activities like this, CCO, ICF, you name it, community really builds really shared learning and experience. So since today's around storytelling, I thought I would start first with a story. So I'd like you to just sort of sit back, listen, and hear what you hear, experience what you hear, or experience what you experience, and we'll talk a little bit about it after the story's done. I can hear the performance of my competition through the double doors of the hotel ballroom. It's 1984, and I'm a junior in high school, and it's the second day of the Indiana State Championships. And I'm supposed to win. I'm like the favorite. And after the first day, it seems as if that's what's going to happen. There's no public scoring that's happened, but everybody's sort of talked about all the performances the previous day. And I'm standing outside of these double doors, and I look down and I've got this folder. And in this folder are 3 copies of 20 minutes worth of sheet music, 20 minutes of 3 different songs that I've had to learn, not over hours, days, weeks, months, but really years. And I think back to all the practice and, getting the sheet music and then fingering exactly, which fingers go where and in what order. Should I do it this way? Should I do it that way? How to play these chords and really sort of mapping out an approach for this music. and then practicing it over and over again, different passages, the entire song, segments, how they fit together. How do you memorize hundreds, if not thousands, of each one of these notes? And as I'm thinking all of this, the doors open and I hear the applause from whoever has just finished ahead of me. And I'm ushered into this room and I give my folder to the three panel judges that are sitting there in front of the table. They start to divvy out their stuff. I see the audience in the background and I take my place ready to begin. And I'm just waiting, which feels like this eternity of waiting. Until the lead judge finally looks up, has the score sheet all ready, and he says, whenever you're ready to begin. And I think to myself, ready to begin? When am I ever ready? Right? As I said, I've just practiced this so many times that it becomes part of your neurology. They talk about muscle memory, but it's more than that because you can't consciously think of all the notes that you're about to play. There's hundreds, if not thousands, as I said, and chords and so on and so forth. So you have to sort of give up this conscious trust of something more than just your conscious self, which it must be because the next thing I know, I'm playing, right? My hands are moving, the music is coming out and this is interesting zone that you really need to fall into. It's this sort of careful balance between letting this neurology do what it does. But you can't get totally distracted either, because if you do, you might lose your way. So you've got to focus. But you can't focus too much. Otherwise, you start thinking, I don't even know what the next note is. I just have to sort of trust that my body does. And I'm sort of fighting this back and forth, trying to find myself into the zone. It's that feeling that they describe with athletes or anybody else where they're sort of tight when they're doing whatever it is that they're doing. And I'm experiencing that all along the way until I start to realize, oh my God, I don't know what happens three lines from now. I mean, I'm mentally picturing the sheet music, but I've totally lost my way and it's coming closer and closer and closer. And I'm thinking, I don't know what to do. But I know what not to do. You never stop, right? You never stop. Stopping is like watching somebody in gymnastics fall off the balance beam. You're like, it's done, it's over. So I'm thinking, okay, I can't stop. I don't know what the next measure is. I don't know what the next line is. I don't know what the next page is. I don't trust myself to just let my body figure it out, which seems so weird. But I do remember thinking, I know the chord 2 pages from now. So it's the next thing I know, I just like, it's like I jump forward in time into this next couple of pages. And I can see out of the corner of my eye, all the judges are confused, right? They're moving pages around. I'm obviously not done something I'm supposed to do. I see people making X's, notes, whatever it might be. And then they finally find their way. And I realize there's like two things in that moment. The first thing is it's over. I'm cooked. I'm done. This is it. I've lost, right? And all those hours, months, years, whatever practice that in the expectations that everybody had for me to win are like, that's it. This is like done. Um, and the second thing I realize is more this sort of physiologic feeling of relief, right? I just remember just being incredibly relaxed because I had nothing to lose because I'd already lost. So I just sort of fell into the zone I've been so hard trying to find. And played probably the rest of the 15 minutes really well. Perfect, no, but good, right? I was in the place I fought really hard to try and get to. Eventually I finish and it's applause and so on, and they collect all the music and they give it to you, and it's this beautiful moment where you can look and see all the stuff that they've marked and what you did wrong and whatever, but I'm not going to look. I already know. I leave, my instructor is there, and they're sort of cheering you on. Our conservatory leader comes and they're also being very sort of upbeat about the whole thing regardless of what sort of happened, try and build you up a bit. But I know, right, I know that I didn't win this. So the next day, when all the awards are going to be announced for the various competitions and such, my conservatory leader comes and catches me early in the day, and he tells me the result of what's to come. And as it turns out, I was right. I lost by a half a point. And he had informed me that this was the closest the competition had ever been in all the years they had done it. I don't know since. It's obviously been decades. But a week later, I was all alone in a conservatory room, and I played these 20 minutes worth of music, and it was perfect, right? I remember feeling this overwhelming sense of being in it, but then when I was done, also this really satisfying, fulfilling, yes, right? This is it, right? This is what I've been working for so long, and I've done it. Nobody heard it. Sounds like a fishtail. There's no proof, right? Nobody heard it. It wasn't in competition. It was something that nobody experienced. Um, and part of me would have thought, well, why couldn't I do this a week ago? But it didn't really even come to mind. And it was such a moment of clarity for me that I never competed again. In fact, I quit teaching music. I quit playing in ensemble. I never played in any competitions after that. And people would tell me how much I would regret this years later, like, oh, you're so close. One more year, right? This would have been your year. Just do it one more time. And they're right that I've thought about it for decades, but not for the reason that they had, because I never regretted the decision at all to keep going forward or to stop going forward. My senior year of high school, I did all these things I would have never done before, whether it was being in a different plays or athletic events or whatever it was. It was really a moment of clarity that I look back on now, asking myself the question of why am I doing this and who am I doing it for? So whenever I sort of get wrapped into anything, that's a moment I look back to that helps bring clarity. Although for decades, I've also moved two steamer trunks full of hundreds of trophies around the United States as I move from this place to that place and wherever else it's been, until this last fall. I decided I'm getting rid of all these. I took them out. They were wrapped in cellophane. My mom had packed these things up, God knows how long ago. They still had the smell of her house, which is a really strange sensation to come back so many decades later. But I donated each and every one of them to a local trophy shop. Um, well, that's not entirely true. I donated all of them but three. The first one was the first trophy that I ever won back when I was in second grade. The second one is the last trophy I ever won from this competition that I lost that I was just telling you about. And the third one is the one that probably means the most to me and has the most impact on my life. But it's a story that I've never really shared with anybody else because it's a story that I probably won't. It's one that's really just for me. Okay, so that's our starting story for today. Thank you for allowing me to share that with all y'all. So, with that, I guess I have some questions for you guys as you sat back and listened to what I had to say. And I'm curious if there are any moments or times where you think about, or there are any emotions or sensations or feelings or anything that you experienced sort of as you were hearing what it was that I was sharing. So, any thoughts that anybody would like to share? Happy to have them come through chat, or if you want to go off mute, it would be great. Otherwise, too, for those of you who know me, I start calling on people. So if nobody's going to volunteer, you'll be voluntold. I was hooked. So Deborah, talk a little bit about what you experienced.
Well, I was like, where are we going? What's happening? What's next?
Right.
So, I was like, okay, I can't wait to hear where this is going. Because as it built, I was getting more invested. At first, I'm like, what is the story? Where are we going? What am I supposed to take away? Like, I felt myself working, like, what's going on? And then I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, this is kind of interesting. I wonder where we're going. And there was like a surrender in the moment for me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. Panera Sarah.
Um, yeah, it was that sense of you saying, I practiced this, and then I'm in it, and I don't remember what's next. And that, like, I felt the anxiety rising in terms of just being caught, of just like, oh, dang, here it is. It's all for nothing.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh, for sure. Michael, you have any reactions?
Well, in that similar area of the whole thing held me. But that moment that Sarah just referenced hit me in a different way. And that is, I think in other capacities, I have had that feeling of, I'm so ready, I'm at the top of my game, and then my head gets too much into it.
Mm.
And I realize in my head, I'm going to lose my ground. I'm going to lose my, this is not how I intended this to go, and the cycle that goes. And there was just something, I don't think I'm articulating it very well, but I knew
Mm.
that I knew a similar feeling. I can't say I know how you felt,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
recognized some of that. And I felt a lot of emotion with that.
Yeah. Thanks for that. You're a mind reader. My other question I wanted to ask folks was what if anything did you find in your own life, right? Did something resonate for you? May not have been the same thing. And Catherine, I saw you nodding a little bit as Michael was sort of describing some of the things that she was experiencing, maybe not the same, but some similar emotions. Anything that you want to share with the group? Oh, she's
We can't
off
hear you.
mute, but still can't
Sorry
hear.
about that.
Oh, there we go.
I think there were definite moments where I was resonating with the emotions of the anxiety and the performance anxiety and the other pieces. I also think I was nodding my head with Deb as well, because I found myself in the beginning going, where are we going? What's the purpose? Did I miss the tee up? Was I not listening? Like I was in my own head. And then I just
Yeah.
had to just say, you'll get there, just listen, follow the story, we'll figure it out in the end, right? And let go. But definitely I think along the way you could see those pivotal moments of emotions that were coming through.
Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. Jalal.
Yeah, I felt a lot of what people said in terms of like the feelings, imagining the anxiety and so forth. And I found myself trying to predict where it was going. I
Yeah.
think a couple other people said it, and I expected a plot twist. Like when you were saying, I know the music, and but I can't remember what's next. I was sure you were going to say I won the competition. It was the biggest margin of victory ever. And so I think that it's curious for me because it makes me think, okay, why did I go there? I think a lot of people were like, where's the story going? But like, why was I expecting something out of your story? And kind of what does that say too? So I'm curious what takeaways there'll be from that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for that insight. I love that plot twist comment. We're going to talk about all these things. Let's see. Roxanne's got a comment. I didn't trust myself to know felt like a pivotal moment. Oh, you want to say anything more about that, Roxanne?
Uh, sure. It just felt like that. I think what Jalal just said, I was also kind of hoping for a plot twist, just the optimist in me. Um, but when you said I didn't trust myself to know, I think it was what was coming next.
Yeah.
That's when I knew, oh, this isn't going to like you. This is where it takes a turn of when I don't trust myself anymore. That's a moment where it's probably I'm not going to get into that flow, right? So that's what I was thinking. Like it felt like, oh, that was the moment where you accepted that you weren't going to be perfect
Hmm.
in the story that I
Yeah,
heard.
right. It's brutal. And Jalal, your comment, oh man, I was hoping for and you won by the biggest mark. There was a moment, right? Overnight where I'm like, well, maybe. But yeah.
Well, it was pretty close, it sounds like.
Point
So
0.5. I don't know. It's funny looking back at it. I don't know if 0.5 made me feel better or worse. Like, what? Dang it.
I know it's
Um,
still second. Dang it.
yeah, right. What first place loser? Okay, so let's take some of the things that we've talked about, and what I want to share with you is a framework of things to think about in this whole idea of storytelling and how everybody has a story, and how to put some of these elements that I think you all really ferreted out from the discussion we had, sort of from this story, and see how we can put in a bit of a framework. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. All righty. So hopefully y'all can see that. So here's the framework we're going to talk about. And a couple of things to keep in mind as you already have talked about two key things already, and that is what emotions or feelings sort of are coming forward for you as your listeners, but also importantly, how you're telling the story yourself as the presenter or speaker. And then how can you have that potentially relate or become real for whoever your audience members are in different ways. It's like when somebody watches a movie or reads a book, right? They all hear, see the same thing, but everybody takes away something differently. And that's sort of the power, right, of storytelling. We're not all supposed to have exactly the same experience, but we're all supposed to have an experience. Oh, Catherine, trombone competitions for me, dying to know the instrument. Ah, yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to share that part. Okay, so here's our framework that we're going to talk about, and it's find it, shape it, and tell it. The way we're going to approach this, though, is the opposite of how I've presented it here. And that is we're going to start with the tell it part, right? I think for me, in really being able to convey a story in the way that I would hope, is I start with the end in mind, right? The tell it piece. And so we're going to start there, and then we're going to go to the shape it, and then we're eventually going to go to the find it, because finding the kernels for a story is actually a lot easier than one might think at first blush. It's really trying to figure out, why am I telling the story and what is it that I'm trying to convey? So with that in mind, here we go. The tell it part. So for each one of these elements, we're going to have two different things that we are going to spend a little bit of time on. And so the first one is the one that I asked you the first question around, and that is, what sensations or feelings or sort of experiences did you have for yourself? Because Maya Angelou, I think, has this quote, right? People are going to forget what you say, are going to forget what you do, but they're always going to remember how you made them feel. And I'd even add more, how they made you feel about yourself. But it's this feeling piece that we remember. It's why storytelling has become such an important part of advertising, right? You think about some of these really genius sort of Apple commercials aren't necessarily about the product. They're about how people's lives are affected. Or I remember when the iPods first came out and people were just sort of enjoying music, or how their lives were maybe enriched by a product. So they're telling a story that goes along with it. So I always ask people to think about these questions. What do you want to feel in whatever it is that you're telling? Is it excitement? Is it compassion? Is it inspiration? Is it frustration? And whatever that thing is, it's going to translate, right? We're these amazing animals that have these mirror neurons, where empathy comes from. So I'm sure if you've ever seen somebody on stage or give a presentation or a talk and they totally start to freeze up, or they're kind of concerned, or they're very nervous, you could be one of 500 people in the audience and you're still feeling that nervousness, even though the spotlight's not on you and you're not on stage. And the opposite is also the case, right? That excitement, that passion, that driven sort of viewpoint is coming through them, and it's feeding off you, and it becomes this beautiful psychodynamic feedback loop. You can see it when politicians connect with people in the audience in town halls. All those things just sort of come through. So you have to ask yourself this question, okay, when I'm telling a story, or this story, what do I want to feel? But I would really ask that question first, as I'm getting together with this group, what do I want them to be feeling during and hopefully after, that's going to linger later? And then find the story that fits into that. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. I used to do something called, pre-COVID, it was called the anti-networking meetup. A lot of people hate networking, right? So, if you end up calling it that anti-networking meetup, then people are suddenly like, yeah, I hate networking, I'll go to this anti-networking thing. So they would go, and we would do some of the things that we're talking about here, whether it be learning about body language or connecting with people or how to introduce yourself. It was literally a networking meeting. We just call it the opposite. But I do remember having one gentleman come up to me and he said, I have a really hard time connecting with people and I don't know what to do. And I just asked him that question, what are you feeling right now as you're talking with me? And he said, I don't feel anything. And I thought, yeah, me either, right? I'm just sort of a little bit dying inside. And it's not like you have to be a super bubbly person. You could be a very intellectual, it could be anything, but I would just ask that you have some feeling that you're bringing forward. And this takes place in organizations too. I mean, I work with leaders all the time, and they're like, well, can you really do that when you're, leading a presentation about, this quarterly report? Well, absolutely, right? Because the numbers are telling literally a story about your business. And what is that story? Is it one we're excited about, whether it be with growth? Is it one that we're frustrated about and what we need to do in order to change? right? So you're probably feeling something about what this is. I wouldn't go over the top, and it very definitely depends on the audience you're talking to, but there's something underlying each one of those things because you can tell the same thing multiple different ways. For example, you might be talking about the fact that the employees that you're hiring into your organization are not representative of the population at large when it comes to demographics. You could come at that from a very curious perspective. So what I'm finding is we're looking at the data that the people we're hiring don't seem to be representative of the population. You could come at it from you're pissed off. Hey, the people we're hiring this organization aren't representative of the demographics of the population who are applying for these roles. So depending on what it is that you want to convey, tap into first, well, what do I feel about this thing? And then sort of let it free or let it float more free than what I would see. And I would say this is especially true within corporate America, where a lot of people feel like they have to be very stoic about everything. And God knows how many presentations I've sat in front of where it's just quarterly report after quarterly report. But I don't have to take away from this. Tell me the story about these numbers and also tell me what it is that is meaningful behind each one of these. Um, Okay, I'm going to pause there and see thoughts, reactions, challenge my thinking here on this. Start with the feeling first, and then we'll work on the story later. What do you guys think about this? Oh, Lynn flute. I missed that earlier. Cool.
I'll jump in quick.
Yeah.
I thought before in doing any storytelling or events about what do I want the audience to walk away with. I've never thought to start with what do I feel? And so that's really got my attention now.
Yeah, thanks. Catherine.
I was going to say the same thing, that let yourself feel. I love how you said, let your feelings free so that it can dictate the energy. And I think you're right. Coming from a corporate setting, I think we sometimes try to bottle ourselves so much that your passion in a topic can get lost when you're trying to remain professional or neutral. So I love just that statement of let your feelings free and start there.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, context is really important. So especially if you're it's the beginning of the year or a vision statement, or we're trying to rally the organization or whatever else, this is definitely the time, right? Where you want people connecting with whether it be the mission of the company or the values that they embody. This is the perfect place for stories, and it's a perfect place. I mean, it's what I really enjoyed. I mean, there were certain leaders I used to work with that I really looked forward to their like town hall meetings because I knew, oh, I love how they tell these stories, whether it's a patient story that they're going to convey to me or an experience that they had with a doctor or whatever else, because it made it real. All those hours that you're spending in the office behind in a cube and looking at a screen or in meetings that feel like they're endless. Why are we doing all this, right? There's got to be a reason, not just sell more widgets, right? It's solving a need, right? Whatever it be, commercial health care, whatever it might be. So we're helping people. At least we hope we are. What comes up for me is when I allow myself, capitals, to feel my feelings. It brings me to deep presence, and then delivery and presence with audiences even better. Yeah, right, exactly. It's this. That's when you get people coming up to you later and say, "Wow, I was really inspired, moved, whatever emotion that they have by what you just said. You're so authentic," right? That's where you hear the beautiful words of authenticity then start to come forward because you let that happen. And the risk is the vulnerability piece, I think that Catherine, you're getting to, especially over in, regardless of what audience, but in a corporate audience, even potentially more challenging. You're like, gosh, how vulnerable can I really be here as a leader? And I found every leader who's taken a moment to have those moments of vulnerability, and everybody does it differently. You could have a very charismatic kind of person, and you could have somebody who is physically a little bit less charismatic, but they still connect because of the vulnerability they bring forward. So there's no one size fit all. It's just really sort of tapping into, okay, what am I going to feel here? And I think the good frame too is to always think about, I try to think of myself as the messenger of the message, not the message itself. So how do I embody whatever, I'm trying to honor whatever the message is that I'm bringing forward. So it's less maybe me and more about, gosh, what do I feel about this? And I hope other people will too. Okay, so feeling first. So think about what that thing might be. And then there's ways, going to go back here to our little slides. What's sort of the second piece of this sort of tell it? And I would say it comes down to this whole um, superpower in some ways of questions, because I feel like questions, and you guys already, Michael, you started this around saying, hey, I was starting to feel in my own experience what this thing was like. It wasn't the same, but I had a similar feeling, and you can start to embody yourself, go inside your own head, go inside your own physiology. Yes, I get it. And this is where it becomes even more powerful. You've got the feelings. Now they're starting to actually port it over into another experience in their life. So now you're creating even stronger empathy around whatever the message is, because this isn't just an intellectual discussion anymore. It's not just a feeling anymore, but you've connected with some experience that's maybe universal or personal or a little bit of both. And questions can help amplify that. I didn't use it in mine, but let me give you a few different kinds of examples of questions. You know, coaches, right? So you know powerful questions already. But you could give a memory type of question that you can ask. Like, think about a teacher who made a big impact on your life, and how did they do that? Right? So that might be appropriate in some kind of talk you're giving. And then people start to go inside. Yes, I can think about Mrs. Hecox in seventh grade. She was a science teacher and she really saw my interest in science. And what she ended up doing was she bought me a subscription to Popular Science. In fact, that's a real story, right? And I wasn't even going to tell it, but I thought, oh, who's the teacher that impacted me? It was Mrs. Hecox, seventh grade. And I'm like, wow, how cool is that, right? And y'all, I don't know. I'll just ask. Anybody have a teacher come to mind when I just said that? Anyone? Yeah, okay. Michael's nodding. It's like, yeah, for sure. You know, we all have one. And now suddenly it's like, oh, I know your world. Even though we might have had different teachers, I get it. You can ask, so those are memory questions. Well, all these are memory questions to some degree, but you can ask sensory related questions, right? Like when you think about compassion, what do you notice happens in your body? Right? What do you notice happens? I know for me, when I think about the word compassion, there's some sense of peace and ease and connectedness and just this, it's almost like this rays are coming out of me into this other person, and the rest of the world sort of goes dark, and there's just this beautiful sort of tunnel vision and connection that sort of gets created. I don't know what it's like for you, but just asking the question, our brains are these really wonderful things. It won't not answer the question for us, right? It's like saying, don't think about the, blue spotted elephant, right? You're going to think about it. So it's the same thing when you ask a question of someone, their brain will answer. And so that's why questions become, especially as coaches, really important. You can direct the mind where you want it to go based on their question. There's a big difference between how come you can't lose weight versus how can you be healthier? Oh, those are similar questions, but they're taking somebody in very different directions. You can also have meaning questions like, hey, what meaning did you build from one of the more painful moments in your life? Whew, okay, this might be more appropriate for a very, different kind of presentation or story that you're telling, that you're trying to bring people into a very specific mood. Um, or you can invite them, right? Sort of this last picture. It can be an invitation into imagination. Imagine, right? A year from now, and you've completely transformed your life, right? I'd even say how, but people can go, yeah, a year from now, transformed, and they're going to make meaning out of all of that. So, feelings that you're trying to really embody both for yourself, but also for those listening to your message, can be greatly amplified by these questions, because now they're really starting to embody this whole experience of whatever it is that you're going to be chatting about. All right, so thoughts on this? I'm curious, y'all coaches too. What are some of the what is this? Mr. Han, 10th grade. Oh, Mrs. Han. There you go. So Deborah's got her teacher who impacted her. Oh, I'm super curious. You want to share how?
Do I want to share how?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, how
Um,
did you?
well, 10th grade was just a really, it's just like a really weird time in a person's life. It was in mine. There's like a, and like, it was like the first teacher I remember really seeing me and like what made me special in a really meaningful, true, authentic way that resonated. And it wasn't some platitude or something general. It was like, I see you. and this is what makes you amazing, and this is how I see it in the world. And so how can I help you? It was kind of like that sense. I couldn't even tell you
Yeah.
what she did, but I just remember feeling like that. Even to this day, like she comes to my mind first, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What an amazing gift, right? And I think hopefully all of us had a coach, a teacher, or somebody in our life that's done that because it's exactly what you just described. I'm not even sure how they did it or what they did, or maybe you do, but it gives you something that maybe you couldn't give yourself, and you see yourself through somebody else's eyes, and you're like, yeah, okay, I'm okay. So questions, powerful questions, even as you hear this idea of adding questions, and we'll talk more about this when we get a little further into this about how to use questions in your storytelling. Anybody use questions when you're presenting or doing stories? Michael's doing a yeah, I do. You want to share anything?
Well, that might be actually more credit to my husband when we present together, but a couple he's done, one related to his cancer journey is, what would become important in your life if you were told you suddenly had a,
Yeah.
really hard disease? And everybody just stops to think. And another one is he took one from Mr. Rogers.
Hmm.
And it was something along the lines of it starts with, just envisioning. Think of the people who had the greatest impact on your life or, meant the most to you in any way. And just let them come to mind. And then you sit and think, and what might they think now, knowing you thought of them in that way and like how important connections are. So I guess that's more credit to him. So I'm stealing his thunder, but
Yeah, no, those are beautiful. I have one that stuck with me for years as well, I think it was being told. There was a story that came in and talked to our organization, and it was a woman. I forgot her name, which is embarrassing, but I remember what she said. And she was talking about climbing Mount Everest. And all the stories one learns from sort of perseverance, failure, and so on and so forth. But she was also integrating some questions into um, sort of corporate life, right? How do you take these things and they're just not sort of these large sort of life moments, but how do you bring them forward? And I don't remember how she knitted these two things together, but I do remember the question. And the question was, what if you're only allowed to come to work and work 4 hours a day, and that was it? How would that transform what you focus on, what you do, and where you put your energy? Um, and I think of it, frankly, I use it with my coaching clients often too, because you can't just gild the lily of, well, I normally work 8 or 10 hours, so I'm just going to be a little more efficient. No, you like, people are like, oh, I do work totally differently. I'd only focus on these two things and I give it, I'm like, okay, phew, that seems like a pretty big deal, right? And what would need to happen to make that be true? And how would things actually be different? In similar ways, right? When you see people talk about 5-year plans and say, well, what would need to be true to get that done in 6 months? Whew, what? Those kinds of questions are like, they're so outrageous that it just makes your brain think differently. But you all know this, right? You're coaches, right? So questions are powerful. And I guess I would ask, as you're thinking of powerful questions or go-to questions that maybe you use frequently, also think about keeping a notebook of, this might be a good question for a topic or a talk or whatever it is that I might want to think about in the future. And we'll talk about creating story boxes in the future for future talks, but also a question box, right? Hey, here's a good question. And think about it with respect to the different emotions, feelings, sensations, or experiences that you want to evoke. Wow, what question, right? Kind of like the ones I've walked through, different examples, memory, sensory, meaning questions, imagination, right? They all bring forward slightly different emotions and feelings, especially when wrapped in a context of a story. And one of the easiest ways to do this is when you hear a question that really hits you hard, dang, man, write that down because that's going to trigger you when you're in a talk and you bring it forward. It's not just being asked of the audience, you'll find yourself going into that same sort of space. Okay, so feelings and amplifying those feelings are the heart to sort of the telling it piece, right? Sort of the end in mind that I mentioned before. So next part. Sharing screen again. So now we're going to go into the shape it piece. So shaping the story, having the feelings great. In fact, I think if you've got that far, you may not need anything else. But to tighten it up a little bit, we're going to give you a couple more things to think about. So how does one sort of shape a story? And we're going to do two elements here as well. And the first are hooks, right? How do you get people curious, right? And you're really trying to generate some degree of curiosity. What's going on here? What's the question that's being asked? A little bit about what you guys mentioned before of what's happening, right? He's telling a story, standing in front of a couple of doors. Did I miss something? What's happening, right? Your brain's wanting to fill in the blanks, and there's curiosity that's piqued. So there are many, many, many ways to create hooks. I'm going to share three of them with you as just sort of starter packs. And, if you can do one or more of these, you're going to be golden, and you can continue on from this if you like. One is called inverted expectations, which sort of violates the expected script. Oh, I thought that was going to happen. Whoop, flipped. Another one is vivid moment, dropping into an active scene. And then the last one is the audience mirror, sort of reflecting a known reality. So we're going to go and give an example, and then we're going to see how the hooks change using that same example over and over again as sort of an illustrative way to see the impact. And depending on your brand or your style, right, some are going to resonate more or less with you, or it might even be the particular story. I can tell you when I was thinking about the one I was sharing with you this morning, it was like, well, where do I want to start? At one point, I was starting with a question. At another point, I was trying, something very different. And eventually I landed on, well, hopefully it's obvious, but we'll ask you later to see which ones you think it was. So here's our base example. And this is sort of, you're in high school and taught to state your thesis statement kind of way of giving a presentation. So today I'm going to speak to you all about the day I finally got promoted. So this is sort of our base example. So a question for you guys is, you hear this sort of example, how much curiosity is piqued, right? Do you feel like, you can tell me like 1 to 10? I'm an 8, and because I'm super curious, or I'm a 4, or I'm just sort of waiting to see what happens. What do you guys think? Put some numbers in the chat. How do I get the chat up here so I can see that too? Chat. What do you think? How curious? How much curiosity, feeling, emotion was sort of sparked by this? A 3 for Roxanne. Thank you for being first, Roxanne. Anybody else? Where are you at? 5s, some 5s, some 4s. So it's okay, right? I mean, it's not bad. You get a clear expectation about what's going to be talked about. This person's going to talk about being promoted. I don't know, anybody find themselves thinking back to the days they got promoted at all? Or maybe now that I've asked the question, I've seeded it, but anything like that? People are pretty excited about this topic. Okay, so we're going to try it and change it up a little bit and see what happens to some of your responses. So I like going in reverse order, sort of like we did before. So we're going to do the audience mirror. You know that feeling you have when you have your performance review and your boss starts by saying something like, so how do you think you did this year? Yeah, so Michael's nodding. So is Catherine, what just happened there? I feel like that just happened to you yesterday.
Maybe. That just, I like the amount of like dread, that kind of negative energy, for me, negative energy of like, how do you think you did this year? And that emphasis on the you or other pieces goes to, well, I think I maybe performed one way, but sounds like you might think differently, right? Like that uncertainty of what's coming next.
Yeah, right. I have definitely had this happen from more than one boss. I hate it each time it happens for exactly the same reason you just said. I'm like, well, I already filled out my performance review. You saw what I wrote, so that's not a mystery. The fact that you're asking this question means you either didn't read it, which I don't think is true, or you did, and you're like, damn, this person does not know, have self-awareness about how they did. So, Roxanne, I also saw you reacting to this. Anything? How did you react to this? What's your experience here?
Yeah, I just think that's just a terrible. Well, yeah. Again, I told you how I think I did this year.
Right.
I scored myself.
I wrote it down. Brutal. Oh, man, I might have lost Roxanne and locked up. Hopefully, y'all can still hear me. Somebody move so I can see. Okay, Michael's moving, so it's not me. Excellent. Oh, Roxanne's
It's
back.
me. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I've been happening lately, but yeah. So
Oh.
I don't know what you heard. It doesn't matter. But I think it's a negative setup and I don't like it. And I
Yeah,
felt
I don't
that.
like it either. So I'm curious now when it comes to either emotion or curiosity or anything, how does this one score for you? A lot of you had threes and fours and fives. You could be negative emotion, but did you immediately feel something more or less? What do you think? So, okay, so we have seven, a couple sevens, another seven, eight. Yeah. I know for me, I definitely quote feel it more, and I'm also curious. Now what's going to happen, right? Were they wrong? Did they get it right? I want to hear the story. Yeah, I relate to already. Exactly. Okay, so that's sort of the audience mirror. This is one where you're like, huh, all right, I want to talk about performance reviews, but can I tap into some universal, whether it's anxiety or excitement or combination and this asks a question too. So you see, I've sort of set it up. But there's also sort of the questioning piece, right? Hey, you know that feeling? There's also a presupposition here that says everybody has had this feeling because I'm telling them, you know that feeling. And you're like, well, even if I didn't, I can kind of relate to it. But I think this is pretty much a universal, at least for those who've ever gotten this question, um, I think you probably have felt this way. Okay, so that's audience mirror. Vivid moment. Walking to my boss's office, I still remember half the lights were on. My performance review, year five on the job, the last four, it ended the same. No promotion. I checked my pockets for the Kleenex. I wanted to stay focused, but right after this, I had a follow-up call with my doctor. Okay. So tell me about this one. 10. Ooh, Sarah drops it. Gets the 10. Michael's nodding 10. Carla also 10. Yeah. Carla, tell me about your thoughts here. I'm
My
locked in.
gosh, why is the mute button so elusive sometimes? Um, I don't know. I could picture it. I could picture walking into a room, just the detail of the lights, just the remembering and feeling like in your body, like that I'm setting myself up for disappointment again, and anticipating that Kleenex was needed, so there's going to be some emotion there. And then what the heck are they going to talk to their doctor about? Are they sick? Is it just a routine exam? Um, so I'm very hooked.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Jalal, 9. Yeah, Jalal, tell me about it. Share your 9.
I think
Oh,
for
cut off
me,
Roxanne though. Roxanne, you're next. Go ahead, Jalal.
yeah, for me, the emotional piece of feeling like what you or whoever is telling the story is feeling like, checking my pockets for the Kleenex and that type of thing, that grabs me to I just think, identifying with like how a person's feeling and a deep feeling, something really personal to them. So now I'm, again invested in like where's this going and even further, um, digging into what this person is experiencing.
Yeah. Thanks, Jalal. Roxanne, I saw you come off mute for a moment. Yeah.
Oh, they painted a picture and I felt like, you know, that I could walk into, and I felt like that's the story I want to know. I want to hear.
Yeah, Deborah, you said it makes me feel connected to you.
Yeah, I feel like, okay, we're opening a door, we're getting to know each other. You've set the bar for where intimacy's going to be. So I'm in,
Mhm.
let's go. I
Yeah.
never thought of it that way, but yeah, I was like, you set a stage for intimacy at a level that you were okay with. And then that was my invitation to meet you there.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I like this one. It's the one I used. It wasn't my hook for my story. It wasn't as powerful as this. But I do think people dropping people into a moment does create curiosity. And I think one of the ways to do that is some, details here and there. Half the lights were on. When I was writing this, I thought, I remember, frankly, one performance review where literally half the lights were on. And I thought this is so weird. It's already a weird, anxious sort of thing. But the company was trying to save money, right? So it was like we're doing half the lights in the organization. So it already gave you sort of this weird, surreal, okay, half you're kind of in the shadows and I'm not. And it was just a weird thing. And it's obviously stayed with me for years. And then the Kleenex piece, right? And I remember, and anybody's ever had any health stuff happening in their lives, work seems like such a big deal until your health goes down the toilet. And then you're like, why have I been working so hard for so many hours, ignoring family and trips or God knows what? And the clarity it brings is like right there. So it's one of these moments that was supposed to bring this dichotomy forward of, oh, I've wanted this promotion forever. And, here's what there's maybe something more going on. Michael, I saw you come off mute as well.
Elusive. You're right, Casey. There's something about remembering the detail of the lights that, based on past experience, I feel like that call to the clinic is going to either be a day they got great news or bad news, because there's something about those like milestone moments where you remember tiny details. So just the way it started had me jumping to the end, like, I think this is going to be more about that doctor's call than that promotion.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Because, the research shows our brain lays down a lot more memories when we're anxious. So all those tiny details not only are seen and appreciated, but they're locked in for like ever, right? They're this, in some ways, a trauma trigger, right? When that comes back, then, you're right back there. Um, okay, I'm gonna do one more example. Alrighty. Okay, so the next example is the inverted expectations. After 5 years of working at least 60 hours a week, I finally got the promotion I'd been so desperately chasing. That afternoon, I was diagnosed with cancer. So similar to the last one, but it's a little bit of the, inverted expectations that Joel was talking about earlier. Now this could have been built up a lot more, similar to the last one, but you're like, oh, damn, right? This really got put into perspective really fast. So different ways, right, of being able to bring curiosity, emotion, feeling into the same exact story, all doing similar things, but also differently depending on where you're going or what it's all really about. Because you're like, all right, well, I know what this is going to be about. But you don't, right? Because it's just the start. Who knows what's going to come after this? Um, but the key is you want people to see if you can get them invested early or at least curious early, right? You want them, okay, so now what? Um, okay, so those are hooks. Questions about hooks. What do you guys think? Reactions to all those? Framework? Is that helpful to think about? How would you use this? So here's what's going to happen later is I am going to ask for a volunteer. And we're going to kind of in real time go through an example. We're going to build an example together. So think about whose hand you want to volunteer or yourself. When we're live in rooms together, a lot of times it's like, hey, I know Steve wants to volunteer. They're going next. Deborah, what are you going to say?
I was just thinking, I'm teaching or presenting a module on pricing in July to our cohort. Pricing is super sexy. So yeah, I got that going for me. So I'm like, how could I do this?
Yeah,
What am I gonna weave in? So yeah,
I can
like the
see the pop
questions
of
and the
words.
feelings I had, but the hooks I hadn't even thought of.
Yeah, right. Well, pricing is an interesting one for anybody who's like an independent contractor who's like trying to price your service. Are you too low? Are you too high? Am I taking advantage of somebody? Why would they really pay me for whatever? So there's great universal stuff there, right? That you can easily do. Hey, you remember the first time you had to ask somebody to pay you for blah, 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 or whatever else it might be. Because yeah, oh gosh. We've all been there. And you probably could also tap into remember the time you asked for what you thought was probably a super outrageous amount of money for somebody to pay you, and they said yes, like within a second, and you're like, oh, dang, they might have paid more that I just underbid myself. Love it. Very compelling. Looking forward to it. Yes, so am I. Okay, so the second part of Shape It. Oops, I got to share my screen, otherwise you're not going to see it. You got to see it to share it. Okay. So this is a super easy to remember structure around, okay, we've got our hook. Now, how do we actually tell the story, right? What's the arc of the story? And there are so many different ways to tell stories, hero's journey, the trials of Hercules. There's all the three act structure, save the cat, you name it, right? If you type in story structure on Google, you're going to get a whole, the snowflake method. There's just a ton of them. I think this one works well for anything, whether it's a corporate story, a personal story, introducing yourself to somebody, introducing somebody else. And it follows this sort of structure. I stole it from some Stanford professor. And it's this sort of what, so what, shift, now what, right? So we think about even the story that I told. What's the what? What happened? Okay, where are we? And it's the, hey, I'm at this competition standing outside the store ready to play. Well, so what? Hey, I'm supposed to win. This is the thing that I've been working for. It's been really important. I've been working years, literally, for this thing. And here we go, right? And what happened? The shift or the twist or whatever else you want to call it, lost. That didn't matter because there was something much greater that was happening here. And now here's how it's sort of impacted me going forward and how it sort of, brought the rest of a clarity question to many aspects of my life that maybe I would have never learned had I actually won. And who knows, right? Hard to say. So this also works with, so if you're in corporate America, it's like, okay, project XYZ, or you're pitching a project. What is the project? Hey, what we've noticed is that there are a lot of people who don't have access to care in XYZ area. Why is that important? Well, it's important because what we've learned is not only is this a group that has a high propensity of having great mortality is associated with this, but they also have a healthcare system that's ready to pay. We just haven't leaned into it yet. Okay, so what's the shift? What do we need to do? Here's what we need to do. We're going to have this dedicated, whatever program policy, such and such, that's going to go from this to this. Instead of going through payers, we're going to go to consumers because whatever. Now what? Okay, here's my 5-step plan. I like this framework for also introducing people. Hey, this is Todd. Why? Oh, well, he's going to talk to us about such and such today. Why is that important? Well, we've learned the research says that storytelling is twice as effective as selling your thing. Okay, great. Now what are we going to do with it? Well, here's a sheet that you can take with you to leverage in the future, so on and so forth.
We could have done that, Todd.
Say again, Carl?
I said we should have done that in our prep session.
Yeah.
Now we know.
Yeah, I mean it's really easy to remember. Or it's like the elevator pitch, right? When you're literally making the pitch, what should you include there? Here's who I am. Here's what I'm doing. Here's why it's important to you, CEO. And hey, actually, I'd like to follow up with you later if possible because we have this great presentation if you're interested in seeing it. I remember we had this new CFO join our organization. He said, I don't know, I met him at some VP meeting, and he's like, "Hey, who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, Todd Fonseca. We're in a good medical education." In fact, that might be important to you because we have these great modules that are like 5 minutes long that can teach you all about the product so you don't have to spend years like the sales force and you feel smart, informed. So when you're speaking to anybody in the investment community, you know as much as you need to know about these products. Where can I send them to you? Right? He's like, this is awesome, right? And it took what, 90 seconds, 30, 60 seconds, I don't even know. So if you just keep that in mind, you're like, okay, just answer each one of these questions. So with that in mind, this is where it's volunteer time, right? Yay. Who's going to be the voluntold or volunteer? I'm looking around. It's like, I wish I had a roulette wheel of your faces so I could see then where, people are coming off. All right.
If nobody else wants to, I have a thought.
Okay, great. Do you have a thought? Ooh, so do you have a topic?
Well, I want to give, if anybody else has something that they want to brainstorm, like Deb for a class or whatever, The
That's like,
At the beginning, Deb's like, at the beginning of the summit, I was asked to tell the story of, and you can tell me if you don't want to do this, but I have the story that I read, and I'm curious how it could be improved by this process.
okay, well, what I'm just going to ask you to do, and we'll go back and forth, is answer each one of these four questions.
Okay.
Okay. So what is the thing you're talking about? Just tell me the what.
I'm telling the origin story of CCO.
Okay, great. Origin story of CCO. Why does it matter?
Um, it matters because it is the reason why this coaching summit exists. It's why we're here.
Why does it matter to you?
Why does it matter to me? It matters to me because I'm really invested in this organization, really wanna, it's my community, my coaching community. It's where I've learned a whole bunch of skills that I didn't learn in the corporate world. It's the place where I've kind of grown as a coach.
Okay, let's build on this last piece. Why is that important to you?
That is important to me because I didn't discover coaching until later in my career. And once I found it, I knew it was home.
How did you know that?
Um, I knew that because when I was coaching, I would leave the session with more energy than I came into it with.
Hmm, yeah. And how did you know that?
Um, might go into a session with low energy,
Mhm.
come out with higher energy, maybe like a feeling in my body of just warmness.
Yeah. And is this something new? Like, had you experienced this in your career before?
I would say as a manager, when I would do one-on-ones with people on my team, I would say that spending that one-on-one time was really the place where I felt like I was doing the best job as a manager.
Okay. So now that we know the what and the why, what's changed as a result of you being part of this community?
Um, I think lots of things have changed. For me, is the question
Mhm.
for me.
Mhm.
Um, I think that I've gained a ton of confidence. Um, I think I've gained a lot of um, meaningful connections.
Do
I
you
think
have
I've
an
gained a
example
lot
of
of,
either one of those two?
mm,
Like a specific example, either a confidence or a connection that has been especially meaningful for you?
um, probably connection. Um, Having a hard time grabbing onto just one particular connection. Um, just seeing Catherine's message. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, I'll pick on Bev. I think that Bev
Yeah,
Lutz has been a, I don't know, powerful connection.
yeah. And how's that impacting things going forward for you?
Um, I think it's impacted um just having a confidence, somebody that's further along in the journey than I am. Um, I don't know, somebody that I can brainstorm with, somebody that I can um get stuff done. I mean, she's my partner of her growth ring, so we get shit done together and we have fun doing it.
Awesome. What are you feeling?
Emotional.
Yeah. Catherine Schumann, what are you feeling?
Just super proud. Casey and I were in the same cohort with CCO. And so when she said she found like a new level of confidence, I am just proud of watching that transformation of her and then feeling her impact as being when we did our coaching sessions and she could coach me or vice versa. So just feeling her impact. So just sitting over here proud and probably being happy that I'm not the one in the seat crying because Casey knows that was usually my role too.
Yeah, I'm good at crying.
Yeah. So, Carly, you just did it, right? And you told the story for what it was, why it was important to you, how it impacted you, and now what it means. And how did we get there, though? Because my guess is, isn't that how you told the story the first time?
Um, I think I was going where you led me. Um, and I think it just got to the heart of it.
Yeah. What else did you guys see as I was asking her questions and how the story unfolded from where it started to where it went? Sarah, I see you nodding. What are your insights?
It got much more personal,
Yeah. And what
which
happened when it
inherently is
became more
gonna,
personal?
yeah, it like I cared more about it
Yeah.
because of the impact that someone had personally.
Yeah. Michael, see you nodding too. Anything you want to add?
Well, I noticed you kept asking her to go deeper. And why is that important? And why is that important? Um, Unlike Catherine, Casey has been a mentor to me. So Bev mentored her, perhaps. Those two are peers, and I learned from Casey and continue to learn from her because I'm in a class that followed. So to hear that impact matters. And because I have a tie to CCO, I always say the CCO above what, in my opinion, is the program it is because of the human beings that are in the program. And
Yeah.
so I felt the words Casey was saying because of my experience. And that's what I always share with people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hope and Carla, and I guess I got called Casey because everybody's calling Casey now because I didn't get
I
introduced to you
changed
that
my
way.
name so everybody knows it's the
Yeah.
same person.
Okay. Um, it's like what I talked about, right? What was the feeling that we wanted to start with? And I don't know how you told the original story at the summit, but I think it shifts if we start asking that feeling question first. And what I get from you is there's so much gratitude that you have as a result of being part of this organization because it's helped you grow in your confidence as a person with connections with people who you just feel you can be you, be seen, be appreciated, and grow from. I mean, that's CCO, baby, right? That feeling. And so once you find that, then you can go to this place that, as we talked about, you got to be a little vulnerable, right? Why is this important to me? I think a lot of times, especially again in some more organizational settings, it's like, how can I sell the benefits of this thing, right? Here are the things that we do for you. The best way, in my humble opinion, is if you share what it did for you. I mean, here's what I'm not a part of CCO. After I heard your story, I'm like, I don't want to be a part of CCO, but I'm not an organization, right? I don't count. Um, so once you do that, then I'm in, right? I am invested. I'm totally with you. And if it doesn't resonate, then they're not your people, right? Then that's not, the message. And one of the things I think I've learned the hard way, especially either giving presentations or stories in larger groups, is you always find the 10% or 5% of people who do not care at all. They're sleeping, they're taking notes, they're on their phone, they're whatever else. And I'm thinking, no, this is a good story. Why aren't you paying attention? And I forget the other 90% that are like, wow, they're, reacting or engaged or whatever. So I think even though sort of a side thing in this whole story, sort of learning process is you're not there for the 5 or 10%. It's not where you're there, and that's okay. Um, Casey, questions? Thank you for being a volunteer.
Yeah, I
Any
don't know that I
other,
have any questions. Thank you.
okay, any other reactions to the experience?
Um,
Oh, yay. Thanks, Deborah.
I don't know. I just didn't expect to get emotional about it.
Yeah.
And especially since I wrote a story and I shared it at the summit. And my story that I told at the summit was different than the story that just came out now. And so I find that very interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Okay, so a little bit more here as we get to the end, because we've done the tell it, shape it, and now find it, right? Where do you find these stories? Some of the things you've already experienced, right? By asking yourself some of the questions around what do I want to feel, and you can sort of tap into some things. But there's a couple different ways. I'm gonna share my screen again. Share. Okay. So different ways to find stories. Um, and I would say big and small. So the first one is what I call a life travelogue. It could be a career travelogue, could be a combination of both. And that's to actually draw a horizontal line. And the horizontal line is time, right? So that's your time, your lifeline. It could be a part of your life, my teenage years, my whole life, my professional career, whatever it is. And the vertical axis is great stuff on the top and really crappy stuff on the bottom, right? The highs and the lows. And I'm sure we all have them, right? It's life. And you can sort of plot, hey, I remember, well, if I did my whole lifetime, gosh, the first thing that came to mind, this is really weird. Maybe this is therapy for me. The first thing that came that was like above the line was my first kiss, right, with this girl, Kim Bishop. It was in a tree house. I was probably like 8 years old. I thought she was like the cutest thing ever. And she kissed me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And you think it's like the highest high ever until you reach some other parts of life, right? Like, oh, you get married, right? You birth your children, right? Whatever else it might be. And then there's all the crappy stuff, right? That also happens, right? My first car accident, and you think that's like the worst thing ever, and that your parents are never gonna let you drive again. And then, cancer diagnosis from my spouse. And then, one of my kids diagnosed with OCD, things that you can't control, it sort of happened to you. And what you find, which is really amazing about life, is regardless if it's high, regardless if it's low, our brains find ways to make meaning out of each and every one of those, whether it's low or whether it's high. They mean something, right? Either give you a perspective on life or you appreciated things in a different way. Who knows what it is? But each one of those moments is a potential story that you can pull from in the future, and they all probably have a different feeling or emotion associated with them. Wow, this is really inspiring, or somebody really believed in me, like the teacher that we talked about before, or the cancer diagnosis that brought clarity and focus to the rest of my life, or whatever it might be. These are very quick to find, but they're also super emotionally charged because of the nature of them. So they may or may not be appropriate depending on the environment, but it's a quick way to really see, hey, I don't just have a story, I have lots of them. And they've meant different things to me in different times of my life. And there might be different audiences for different things that you might want to share. Some, again, maybe more or less important or appropriate, that is, depending on what that audience is. Um, the other thing to think about is the everyday stuff, not these big life-changing moments, but the stuff that just hit you, right? They're simple, they're ordinary, they happen to you. You will probably forget them as soon as they sort of hit, which is why I like creating this thing called a story box. The life travel log is pretty easy to remember because they're core memories, right? You can probably do that. You don't have to go, oh, I don't remember my first kiss. If I don't write it down, it's gone forever. No, they're like these core memories, easier to pull from. The story box ones are a little bit harder, but they're these sort of beautiful snippets of life. It's like watching Boyd Hooper's 10,000 stories, right? Some are big, but some are just sort of these little snippets of, wow, that's pretty cool. I'll give you one example. I was coming back from a trip for work, and I was left the airport and I had to buy something on the way home from Target, and there's a Target right next to the airport. So I park in the parking lot, and as I'm walking into the front door, I'm about, I don't know, 50 feet away, and there's an older woman, and she's got this sort of walker with her, and she's trying to carry something, and it looks like it's a really challenging sort of thing to do. So I just kind of came up to her and said, "Hey, can I help carry that for you?" And she says, "Young man, thank you very much for offering, but you know what? I'm going to do this on my own. At my age, if I don't keep challenging myself, I'm just going to keep going downhill, and I know I can make it." And I'm like, "Oh, I love that, right?" And you know what? I watched her struggle all the way in, but she's like owning it. And had I not written it down, I'd have totally forgotten that. And there's just these little moments, right? Little snippets of life. And I used to write them down on a notebook that was just like story box, life story box, stuff that I thought was interesting. And then I started doing them online, whether it's like on OneDrive, and I just opened up a document and I said, okay, here's a little snippet. Not a bunch. You don't need enough. You just need enough to like spark the memory, woman, target, challenge, whatever else it might be. And then I usually put a little hashtag next to it, like this might be good for inspiration. Like, what did I feel at the time? And so if I ever want a story about inspiration, then I just go Control F, search inspiration or hashtag inspiration, and then all the ones that had inspiration next to them show up. Or teamwork, and I still haven't found a use for this story. I remember once I was in Maastricht and they have all these limestone caves that were carved out so long ago. And during World War II, people actually lived down there, and there were chapels and all these other things that were down there. Um, but they had this one layer that was really difficult to get through, and you could see on the walls even how hard they had to work to get through this, and everybody called it the swear layer because doing that 2 feet, everybody was swearing as they were working through it. And I always thought that was a really interesting story and could be a metaphor for something. And it's got to be a good 20 years, and I've never used it other than as an example of a story that I've never used and wrote down in my story box. So I think, you have these happen on a day-to-day basis, and it's great for then using stories in the future. And anytime I use a story, then I would usually go back in my story box and put a date, use this story on this and this date, just because I don't always like reusing stories in the same audience. So I can have oh, I used that one already for the Women's Network. If I didn't, then I'm like, okay, these people haven't ever heard it before, so okay to reuse. And that's how I use a story box. The other thing that it tends to do, it's like a built-in gratitude journal, right? You've kind of you've created these sort of beautiful moments of life that can pass so quickly by. But the fact that you've actually taken some time to think about it, write it down, appreciate it, codify it in some way or another, it sort of gives you that, you know what? The news doesn't all have to be bad here, friends. And there could be some negative things in your story box too. I mean, that's all part of life, ups and downs we talked about before. But it just has this sort of beautiful after effect too of, giving you sort of your overall sort of meta feeling of appreciating everything that might be happening in and around you. So I love the story box. The big moments are the big moments for sure. They're incredibly powerful. But you know what? The little stories can also be powerful in their own sort of mighty way. So question, anybody do anything like this? How do these ideas sort of resonate for you? I know a number of people journal. You can pull stuff out of there too. What do you guys think? Reactions? Who's going to start their story box?
I've never thought of doing this. It's a cool idea.
Yeah, especially if you take a couple of notes around like teamwork or inspiration or whatever, then they're really easy to find. So you don't have to super catalog them. I mean, people can go crazy and you can put them in a database if you really want to. But Sarah, thoughts?
Yeah. I was just thinking about a story that I've used a few different times, was around like there was going to be changes happening in an organization, and I was one of the people in which the changes were sort of affecting first. And because it was such a like um, distressing experience, that I then used it to guide others through it, so that I'm just thinking about that experience and like
Yeah.
literally all the emotions, the frustrations, the anger, the indignation that I felt. And it was so difficult, but it primed me to be able to be of service of others over the
Mm,
course of the changes in our organization because I had had that experience first. Um,
yeah.
I just think, yeah, that's the one story that popped up for me around like, this thing happened to me, but I used it and transformed it into
Yeah.
something that was very powerful for others.
Yeah, transformational, not for you, just for you, but for everybody, right? You're like, huh, and this is where this meaning, maybe this happened because, dot, 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 right? And be able to leverage, help, light the way for others, empathize, have others be seen, all those things. All right. Oh, okay. 12:52. Yay, we're right at it, friends. So here's next up. We've talked about a variety of different things today. Casey, if you wouldn't mind dropping into our chat a little one pager so you didn't have to take all these notes, but you can. Hopefully you did a few, but you'll have a little one pager that walks through all of this. The interesting thing about the life travel log, and in the notes, it sort of says, what are that's like can be a story itself, the whole travel log. Or it can just be any story from any one of those moments. So you'll see that in there. But I'm curious before we go, and I'm going to ask each one of you quickly, what's one takeaway and what's one action, or it could be the same thing that you're going to take as a result of what you heard here today. So I'm going to start with, since I can't see them, I'm going to pick on Roxanne. Roxanne, takeaway and or action, assuming, oh, yay, there you are. Hooray.
I knew this was coming. Um, I will go back to the first thing that you said about before I start writing a story or thinking to really ask myself, what do I feel about
Mm,
this thing? I never thought about that before. I'm always thinking about the audience and what they think and feel and or what I want them to think and feel. But what do I feel?
yes.
At the core of that, I mean, that really is going to be the foundation for it. So thank you.
Thanks, Roxanne. Jalal.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be thinking about how I start my stories in particular. I've got a handful of stories I tend to share, but one thing I'm always focused on is grabbing people's attention, especially the kickoff sessions in the beginning. And I like the some of the hook ideas you presented and just seeing the different examples. I think I can figure out how to work that into some of what I do.
Nice. Yeah, and lots more hooks, right? Search hooks. Once you guys nail these three, lots of other ways. Sarah.
I have always been so inspired by and admire great storytellers. Um, and I am inspired to grow my capacity as a storyteller. Um, so this is perfect timing. It's great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And you got a great first step. You came here. Catherine.
This feels very relevant for me right now. So I've recently just found myself in between opportunities and looking for my what's next. So I really plan to use the story ingredients around just teeing up, that question in the beginning of why are you looking, where are you at in your career, et cetera. But also
Mm,
just some of my own reflection around the life travelogue and just the uh,
mm,
what I saw you work PC through on the and why is that important and why is that important. Just I think this is also a period of self-reflection that will help me create my own stories.
yeah. Thank you. Michael.
I want to be more deliberate about having a story box.
Mm,
Um, I think I've done it in little ways over the years, and then trying to be more intentional with using the framework when I work on the story.
great. Thanks,
Thank you.
Deborah.
Like, so no, or Roxanne, I'm totally blown away by the feel my own feelings first. Like,
Mm,
it's still weird
yeah,
and really cool. So,
yeah.
and thinking about it as a gateway to deep presence is really powerful takeaway
Mm,
for me. And then I realized I already have kind of a mental story box, so I'm just going to put that into actual action and something tangible.
yeah.
Um, Yeah. So that's where I'm starting. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Deborah. Lynn.
Yeah, thanks. I am a little bit opposite from Roxanne and Deb that with my stories, I feel like I have a lot of stories and a lot of interesting experiences, and I do a lot of self-reflection on what do they mean? Why does it stand out? What did I learn from it? What does the story tell about me and everything? And this idea about thinking about like, okay, with my team or something, if I have a meeting, how do I like if there's a certain feeling that I want to create or buy-in or engagement, what story would I choose to tell to
Yeah.
bring that feeling forward that I'm looking to gain, whether that's compassion, energy, curiosity, thinking out of the box, let's make this space where we're really thinking creatively. And I have stories where I can think of things that have happened where I've really had to be creative in figuring out a solution on how to solve that issue. So that's kind of where I'm at right now to think about
Yeah.
instead of like what's like I have a story I want to tell it, kind of coming at it at the reverse way of I have an audience or I have a meeting or I have an engagement or coaching
Yeah.
client or whatever. What story do I want to use and how do I want to present that to create a certain feeling for that particular session or situation?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Lynn. And one of the things, as you were talking, it also made me think as you do Storybox, these are your stories, but they can also be other people's stories. You might come across a story, which I've done before, and I'm like, oh man, this is especially if it hits you really hard, because when you tell it, it's probably going to hit hard again. So it can be other people's stories. You just accredit, the story to them or some history thing that you learned, whatever. Amy, I think I see Amy.
Yeah, lots of great takeaways. I have a whole page full of notes. But I think the story box in particular, because it's what I will use it for is a future forward sort of lens to look at my life through which I can look at my life. So my challenge has always been kind of mining the past for good stories. But I think starting today, I can create this story box and really look at my life a little bit differently as a playground for stories. So I'm really excited about that.
Thanks, Amy. Is it Sino?
Sino, hi.
Sino, thank you so much for the correction.
Um, I'm gonna kind of piggyback on Amy. I love all your framework and how to think about things. I've actually been keeping a running story ideas notes as I've been listening and thinking about all of this. So I'm going to just keep running that and use the lifeline activity too, because I go through life and have tons of moments, and little ones called glimmers. But I forget them in the moment, right after they happen, I forget them. And so I need to start keeping better track so that I can actually use them to in the work that I do. So
Great.
thank you.
You bet. Casey, bring us home.
All right, I'm gonna double down on the story box. I love the idea of capturing things. I go through different phases of journaling, but also with the tag of what type of story. I think adding meaning to those stories would be helpful.
Great.
All right. Well, we are at 101. Any last thoughts, Todd?
Oh, thank you. So appreciative for y'all attending and really participating. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's a participation that really drives the learning, understanding, and really power of the community. So thank you for that.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone for being here and can't wait to see you at the next Growth Rings. Bye-bye.
Bye.